Howdy gamers. In this video I'm going to be talking about why to run the runes that are good on Veigar and not so much like what to run, just blanket like that. Starting off, Veigar really only has like 3 keystone options in Glacial Augment, Unsealed Spellbook, and I see people running Arcane Comet, but I really don't think that Arcane Comet's that useful. Pretty similar to like why Arcane Comet's bad on Varus. Like you're going to be killing champions anyways. The damage that Arcane Comet's going to be adding is really not significant enough. It also really has no synergy with Veigar's kit as you're damaging with your Q and W. Neither one of those are a slow, so you're not guaranteeing that the comet hits unless the enemy is already stunned. And if they're already stunned, that extra damage isn't going to make or break things, like almost ever. What you get from the rest of the Arcane Comet tree isn't bad as you end up in Sorcery, so then you can have a little bit of mana, a little bit of cooldown reduction for free, ability power per 10 minutes in the game, and then I suppose the secondary runes would be like free boots and then cosmic insight. You do get the highest value that you get from this page is all the minor runes. Arcane Comet is just a waste basically. Like Airy would be better if you're really trying to get more damage off and play for poke, oddly enough. But yeah, the best parts of this rune page is just saving 300 gold, getting mana for free, getting 15% cooldown reduction for free, and then getting ability power for free. The Arcane Comet is just useless, and again, the damage that would build up just isn't significant in the laning phase. I think that you should be looking to run Glacial Augment. The reason being is that you just don't need access to extra damage on Veigar. So all the other keystone options that can give you damage, Electrocute, Dark Harvest, Summon Airy, Arcane Comet, all of those really just aren't necessary because Veigar is weak early, but then hits this point in the mid to late game where he's so incredibly overpowered and he becomes one of the best controlled champions in the game, and you should look him to play it. You should look to play him as so. So with Glacial Augment, it's best into champions that are short range, medium range, or have to dive. If you're against like 5 diving champions like Set, Nocturne, Irelia, Kaisa, and Alistar, right? If you're against all of those, it's fantastic for Veigar because with Glacial Augment, in combination with the active items, you create such a lame dynamic for the enemy to have to play into because first, they have to try to get on top of you and your team. And then with the slow fields, you not only set yourself up for more damage on them with your Q and W, but then you also peel for yourself and your team. You basically provide damage to your team because the enemy's slowed. And then once they're on top of you or your allies, you then have the cage to deal with them as well. And if you have 2 of the slow items in Twin Shadows or GLP, then you can do that twice throughout a fight. And it's so incredibly overpowered. Like it's so unbearing. And to trade that all of that off for like 300 damage in the laning phase with Arcane Comet, and then maybe like 1500 damage in the game overall is such a scam, man. Like you become one of the best control champions in the game with Glacial Augment, and Arcane Comet you just don't need it. If you're a newer player, maybe Arcane Comet's easier, but there's better champions to pick than Veigar if you're a newer player. Champions like Annie is just going to do what Veigar wants to do, but a lot easier for any player from like unranked to probably Diamond 3. So with Glacial Augment, your basic attacks against champions slow them for 2 seconds, and the slow increases in strength over its duration. The slow is less for ranged champions, but that's completely fine for Veigar. And the laning phase, Glacial Augment's utility is kind of whatever. If the enemy is approaching you, well, it's not whatever if they're melee or if they're short range. If they're long range, it's not so useful. I think if you're playing into long range champions, Unsealed Spellbook gains more value, but we'll come back to that. So whenever you're playing into short range or melee champions, what Glacial Augment's going to offer you is like this damage through utility, because if you're slowing them and they're hitting you, then your minions are dealing more damage to them. If you're slowing them, you're setting yourself up for another auto attack, and then that auto attack is basically always going to equate to more damage than the Arcane Comet would give you. If you're slowing them, you're more guaranteed to land your W or your Q on them. So the Glacial Augment, just with the auto attacks, becomes peel for yourself and then maybe more utility to get more of your own damage off. And then if your jungler's ganking, it becomes an extra utility factor in setting up a gank where you're slowing them so they can't run away as easily, and then you can land the cage at a more successful rate. With Glacial Augment as well, slowing a champion with an active item shoots a freeze ray through them, freezing the nearby ground for 5 seconds, slowing all units inside by 60%. So the freeze rate in combination with Veigar's cage is one of the best things like in the game. I can't think of a like maybe Cassiopeia W it could be better, but even in most situations, Veigar cage is just so incredibly strong because once you freeze them with the GLP and then they basically can't move. It's like 60% slow, but like they basically can't move. And then you drop the cage, they're either forced to flash out of it or eat all the damage that's there. And if you're playing around your team as well, it becomes so incredibly strong. The cooldown on it is also 7 to 4 seconds per unit, but even with the active items, like you're not spamming them one after the other, so that's completely fine. And then the slow from the auto attack is also, it's fine that it's on that cooldown. So with Glacial Augment, it puts you in the inspiration tree, and then you have okay options here. Free boots is really valuable for Veigar because he's just surviving the early game anyways. If you're playing into champions that dive you, which you probably are if you're running Glacial, then perfect timing gives you a lot of value as you stop their initial all in, and you don't have to buy a stopwatch to do so. Even with the nerfs to stopwatch where you get it at 14 minutes at the latest, I still think it's completely fine, as if you can negate a Irelia ult or something, it goes a really long way. And then with more deadly champions, the assassin champions like Talon and whatnot, you really negate their power spike, and if you're surviving the early game on Veigar, then you're winning anyways. Against medium range champions or champions that aren't going to dive onto you, I think you should look to run magical footwear. It's kind of the same thing where you're just saving gold with either one, but perfect timing is higher value in the situations in which enemies dive onto you. But I think magical footwear is just like a good default if you're looking for one. For the third rune, I don't think Veigar needs minion dematerializer. Unlike other control mages, he's not going to be killing the backline of the minion wave as fast as the other control mages would. Champions like Orianna, where if they dematerialize the backline, then they kill it with the rotations of abilities. Veigar just doesn't do that, so I don't see the value of minion dematerializer being as high on him. With Biscuit Delivery, I think it's really solid, as you're getting this about the same value as you would with Monoflow Ban with just Biscuit Delivery, and you don't have to stack it up either. With Biscuit Delivery, you receive a total biscuit every 2 minutes until 6. The biscuits restore 10% of your missing health and mana, and consuming a biscuit or selling a biscuit permanently increases your mana cap by 50. So you get access to like this permanent mana increase. It can kind of help you in the laning phase, especially whenever you're trying to shove out the wave, as it can give you the mana to cast another W or another Q. And yeah, it just generally helps you in your laning, but it's mostly just for that mana gained. There's really nothing to it. Lost Chapter is not a bad option though. If you're playing into a control mage matchup in which you're both looking to get a Lost Chapter very early, then Futures Market's going to be your best bet, because if you can overstay in the lane long enough to where you can purchase Lost Chapter with Futures Market and then teleport back into the lane, you can basically lock the enemy laner into the lane with that Lost Chapter purchase, and then therefore you basically win the lane from there. You're going to make them miss at minimum one wave and then probably have a turret plate over them just from having Futures Market. Stay safe, stay indoors, watch out for Corona. For the fourth rune, it's going to be Cosmic Insight. Even though you do have the Glacial Augment slow, I don't think that you need approach velocity. You're using Glacial Augment defensively. You're not using it offensively. And even when you are using offensively, having more movement speed towards the target that you're slowing isn't going to do anything for you. You can move towards them faster, but you're already in range of them with your abilities. So having more movement speed towards them, even though you do have access to about 3 slows with your auto attacks and then 2 active items, I don't think that you need approach velocity because you don't need to move towards them. With Cosmic Insight, it just gives you 5% cooldown reduction on your abilities, summoner spells, and items. So it makes your TP lower cooldown, your flash lower cooldown, and then just gives you more QW and E's basically. And also gives you 5% item CDR. Most champions don't use that 5% item CDR, but with the Glacial Augment build, you could. Nice. For the secondary runes, obviously your best bet is going to be Domination second because of this rune, Ingenious Hunter. With Ingenious Hunter, you gain 15% active item cooldown reduction, plus an additional 5 per Bounty Hunter stack. The Bounty Hunter stacks are unique takedowns on, just unique takedowns. So getting a killer assist on the top laners one, the junglers one, the mid lanes one, the ADCs one, the supports one. To get those is also kind of easy for Veigar. other champions that mostly just like ADCs or like top laners can't really build up bounty hunter stacks that easily because it's harder for them to get kills and assists on like every single champion in the game. But with Veigar, where you have the slows, you can get assist even on kills that you really didn't help out. With your cage, you can also do so, and then you can also probably kill every single champion in the game. So it is pretty easy to build up the Ingenious Hunter stacks. But even just sitting on the 15% cooldown reduction on the active items with Cosmic Insight is going to put GLP and Twin Shadows, once you complete them, on really, really nice cooldowns. And then once it's stacked up in the mid game, then you can really start spamming it, and becomes very annoying for the enemy to deal with, because if they have to deal with 2 rotations of your GLP and Twin Shadows whenever you're trying to fight around an objective, you are inevitably getting a better position around an objective fight, so long that you're playing it properly. So yeah, one of the best runes with the Glacial Augment build. You might be thinking Cheap Shot. With Cheap Shot, damaging a champion with impaired movement or actions deals bonus true damage, and it's only on a 4-second cooldown. Pretty similar to why you don't really need Arcane Comet on Veigar. Like, Cheap Shot gives you access to more damage that you otherwise couldn't have, but you don't need it, and you especially don't need it early. And you're not comboing it with other damage runes like Airy, Arcane Comet, and Scorch. And it's better just to survive early, and Taste of Blood's going to help you do that. With Taste of Blood, you heal whenever you damage an enemy champion, and then it's on a 20-second cooldown. So anytime you trade like an auto, a Q, a W, whatever, in any lane for Veigar, it's going to be good for you. A melee lane or a ranged lane, you're just going to have more HP across a laning phase that you otherwise wouldn't have. Taste of Blood in combination with Biscuit Delivery gives you more safety in lane. Ingenious Hunter plus Cosmic Insight is going to give you more times to cast your abilities than also cast your active items. And then Glacial Augment gives you tons of utility through the slow. And then Free Boost just gives you a little bit of economic benefit. And then if you're playing into champions that dive onto you, Perfect Timing is going to be the best bet. To run other runes secondary other than Ingenious Hunter, like, I think they're pretty low value, mainly because Ingenious Hunter is just so effective with GLP. I think if you're running Unsealed Spellbook, then running something like Sorcery Second would be fine. But if you're running Glacial Augment with like Mana Flow and Transcendence, I don't see it being that good, because like you just don't get as much value out of it as you would just having your GLP up more often. Like, you don't need the access to the mana. You already get that from Biscuits. And then having the cooldown reduction is nice, but you're going to get that through the build path and then through blue buff anyways. So it's really unnecessary. For the shards, I think that it's probably just Adaptive Force, and then resistance based on your lane most of the time. If you're in a harder lane, or if you're in a mixed damage lane, it's completely fine to run double resistances for Veigar. Again, since you're just trying to get through the early game anyways, you could even run cooldown reduction, as if you're just completely conceding the early game, then missing out on this 9 AP isn't going to make or break things, because this cooldown reduction is going to scale with your level. It's going to be more of a reward for getting through the early game, and then having the resistances to endure your lane opponent is going to just be better for you, because it's all about scaling in the lane. So if you're playing into AP, you could run double magic resist. If you're playing into AD, you could run double armor. But double Adaptive Force is just easier. But I think if you're more skilled and then also playing way more defensive, then you're probably just better off running the double resistances with the cooldown reduction. But as a default, I would recommend the Adaptive Force with the 1 resistance, as it's just easier. But think about that scaling. I mean, if you're playing Veigar, you really should be scaling minded, but I don't know. With Unsealed Spellbook, I think it is a better option into like high range, long range. I don't know why I said high range. Long range matchups, champions like Syndra, Orianna, Ezreal. If the enemy has like long range engaged champions like Zac, like Glacial Augment isn't going to do anything against a champion like Zac. But Unsealed Spellbook, if you're into these long range matchups, unfortunately, then you can use Unsealed Spellbook, as with Glacial Augment, you're not going to be in range to really deal with those champions anyways, and Unsealed Spellbook gives you access to more utility to try to deal with the long range matchups. With Unsealed Spellbook, you get to swap your summoner spells. You get your first swap at 6 minutes, and then every time you swap your summoner spell, the cooldown reduction of Unsealed Spellbook goes down, so you can inevitably just swap more and more and more. with Unsealed Spellbook, you're still going to be running Teleport, but then you can have access to a Barrier, a Heal, both of those providing Peel for yourself, and Exhaust, and Ignite, and a Cleanse. And with those, you should be able to endure more in fights, especially early. And if you're enduring more early, then you're eventually going to get to the late game, and then your items and just champion scaling are going to really take precedent over the game versus what any other runes could offer. But what Unsealed Spellbook offers is access to more utility through the summoner spells versus the slow, because the slow is not as effective against long range champions because it's just not, you're not going to be able to land it on them, or when you do, they're going to be out of range anyways, or they have abilities to deal with you, such as like Orianna, Ult, Syndra, E, etc., even if you do try to engage on them like that. So, and if those champions aren't diving onto your team, Glacial Augment loses a lot of value as well. So, with Unsealed Spellbook, you gain basically just combat summoner spells in the early game, and with those, you can look to use those to combat the enemy's range against you, because you're going to have to be spending your HP to get in range of them most of the time, and then summoner spells like Exhaust, Heal, and Barrier can help offset a lot of that. With Unsealed Spellbook, you obviously don't get as much value out of the Domination tree because you don't need to run GLP and then Twin Shadows anymore if you don't have Glacial Augment. So you could be building like Ludens and whatnot. So other runes, like in the Sorcery tree, would give you a lot more value. If you're outranged by a champion like Syndra, like Monoflow Band would be completely fine. And then Transcendence is probably giving you more value. Well, if you run the cooldown reduction shard and then you were to run Gathering Storm, I think Monoflow Gathering Storm would probably be giving you more value, as you still have the 5% cooldown reduction from Cosmic Insight. The cooldown reduction shard is going to be giving you about 6% cooldown reduction at most stages of the game. So you're still going to be getting that 10. And with the Gathering Storm, if you're enduring the early game, you get more and more of a reward for just existing in the game. And if you get to the late game, then you're probably going to be outscaling all the champions that would outrange you, such as Orianna and Syndra. So with that, with Monoflow Band, having access to more mana in these matchups too would be completely fine, because with Biscuit Delivery and then Monoflow Band, you would have enough mana to actually spam your W to wave clear without really putting yourself at risk. So I think that would be completely fine. So with the shards, I think that you could go one Adaptive Force, as you wouldn't want the Adaptive Force for your offense in the lane. It would be for the wave clear. So you could have cooldown reduction, Adaptive Force, and then resistance based on your matchup. But if you're running Unsealed Spellbook, you're probably playing into a higher range AP champion, such as Syndra and Orianna. So probably Magic Resist. And that's really the only variations that I think are really meaningful for Veigar. So again, with Glacial Augment, I think it's best when the enemy has a lot of short range or champions that have to dive onto you. And the utility that Glacial Augment is going to offer you and your team is going to equate to more damage that you would get than you would get with like Arcane Comment and whatnot. But if you're outranged, I think Unsealed Spellbook helps offset a lot of the disadvantage through having access to another summoner spell over the enemy lane opponent. And then with that, you should be looking to scale a bit more with runes like Monoflow and Gathering Storm, as the utility that you get from other runes, I don't see them just like really outweighing what is offered in just the defensive play and the defensive nature of Veigar in these losing matchups anyways. So that's my thoughts on Veigar runes. If this video helps you, leaving a like on the video helps me. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Try to answer most of them. You can check out my Twitch. It's twitch.tv/SorryNelson. But just don't, it's in the description, but don't worry about it. You can just click subscribe. That's fine. You can just subscribe to this channel. That's completely fine. So yeah, I'm looking to do reviews of players' games too. I've made a post about it on my YouTube. So if you're interested in that, you can link your gameplay on that post, and then I'll add it to the video once I do it. So yeah, if you're interested in that, check it out. Alrighty, bye-bye. See ya. I love Veigar, man. He's literally one of the best champions in the game, but just not many people play him. Given his defensive nature, I get it in solo queue, but like one of the best champions in the game. Glacial Augment is gross on him.